George Jones, like Lewis Marshall, Grandpa Jones, born October 20th, 1913, became a staple of the Hee Haw television show in 1969 at the age of 56. With his banjo in hand, his raspy voice and singing voice had experienced both great glory and great loss. A poor childhood in a large, entrepreneurial family forced Jones to find a way to survive from an early age. Music was his only way. Despite his notable achievements such as the Grand Opera House and the family palace, he remained frugal and worried about money. This instability limited his family life with his wife, driller Ramona Riggins. Even though they had been on stage together for more than 3 decades, they struggled with the demanding work schedule and poor health. The ultimate pain came in 1973, when Jones discovered that his close friend, David Stringbean Aikman, and his wife had been murdered in their nearby home. The incident left him devastated. He became quieter and struggled with sleepless nights haunted by the memory. Jones lived at Ridgetop with his wife in his later years, but his age led to a series of health problems, including heart failure, high blood pressure, and signs of dementia. After his final performance at the Grand Opera House in January 1998, he missed 2 consecutive performances. Despite medical efforts, he died just weeks later, on the evening of February 19th, at McKendree Village Hospital in his nursing home, at the age of 84. At the time of her death, Jones's goal was about $2 million, a small sum compared to the rich artistic legacy she left behind. David Ackerman, born June 17, 1915, became known across America as Stringbean, a vulgar comedian with an old banjo and long pants. At the age of 54, he joined Hee Haw Castle, transforming into a unique character, a bird in a cornfield, dropping lucky pennies and reading letters from home in a surprising and engaging way. But behind that gentle exterior was a life filled with dreams, pain, and blood. Born into poverty in Kentucky, Ackerman had to build his first banjo by hand. Independent and charming, she lived off music, comedy, and even semi-professional baseball. Stringbean was never wealthy by American standards, but he loved the banjo-like simplicity and loyalty of life. His marriage to Estelle Stanfill, his first wife, was rumored to have been rocky, partly due to his financial pressures and his private lifestyle. Having lived through the turmoil of the Great Depression, Ackerman distrusted institutions. He kept all his money in his small, wood-frame house in Tennessee. Although their total take was only about $2 million, word of the money on the wall continued to circulate among the crowd until the fortune ran out of the stage. On the evening of November 10, 1973, after performing at the Grand Ole Opry, Stringbean and his wife returned home, unaware that a double robbery was awaiting them. They were murdered as soon as they entered the house. Estelle screamed for help, but was shot as well. Their bodies were discovered the next morning by a neighbor, none other than Hee Haw's co-worker, Papa Jones. The brutal murders shocked the nation, a driller killed by a pair of guns and a spark. 2 of the killers, John and Marvin Brown, were convicted, although one was not executed until 2014, more than 40 years later. Stringbean's death became a tragic symbol of the loss of innocence in an unforgettable world. He and Estelle were murdered at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens in Goodlettsville, where fans often came to bring letters from home. Minnie Pearl played her. It was Uncle Jones, Louis Marshall. Uncle Jones, born October 20th, 1913, had been a fixture of Hee Haw since 1969, when he was 56. With his banjo in hand, his cheerful cheer, and his emphasis on outrageous, he had been making people laugh for more than 2 decades. But behind the rustic uncle's exterior was an artist who faced poverty, mental stress, and a quiet, hopeless end. The youngest of 10 children in a farming family, Uncle Jones endured hardship from birth. He learned music from his parents and worked as a radio announcer to make a living. His early career was spent in rock music, moving from city to city, changing seasons, sometimes saving money just to keep performing. During World War II, he put his music career on hold to enlist in the army. When he returned, his youth was gone, his fame gone, and money was still tight. His offstage temperament earned him the nickname Uncle at the age of 22. His marriage to fellow artist Ramona Riggins was a rare and wonderful one. They performed together for more than 30 years, but even that love faced pressures from health problems and financial worries. In later years, Jones became more withdrawn, appearing less frequently in public. He suffered from persistent health problems, high blood pressure, loss of vision, and occasional bouts of depression. A sad moment came in 1973 when he learned of the deaths of his friend David Stringbean Eicherman and Eicherman's wife. The injury devastated him. Not only did he become the main victim in the process, but he also suffered the loss of his chosen family. The shock left him quieter, tougher, and further removed from fame, despite his induction into the Hall of Fame. In January 1998, after his final performance at the Grand Opera House, his stage performance was interrupted for 2 sentences. More than a month later, on February 19th, he died at the age of 84 at a nursing home in Hermitage, Tennessee. His fortune at the time was estimated at $2 million, a modest sum for a lifetime of performing arts, even if he never became the star of a major opera. Archie Campbell was him. Archie Campbell was born on November 7, 1914. At the age of 50, he joined Hee Haw Castle as himself, a compassionate, desperate, and intelligent comedian whose classics included PFT, You Was Gone, Rindersella, and That's Bad, That's Good, becoming a fixture on the show for nearly 2 decades, helping to define Hee Haw's brand of rustic wit. But Campbell's life outside the spotlight was not all laughter. As a multi-talented artist, actor, musician, writer, and editor, he carried a creative burden that few people had ever seen. The constant demands of writing, filming, and maintaining a public image often left him exhausted, especially when critics felt he was being overshadowed by bigger stars like Roy Clark and Buck Owens. Campbell was quite private about his personal life. Some colleagues pointed to tensions between him and his wife due to his demanding work schedule, which kept him away from home for long periods of time. The isolation gradually wore down his mental health. Even after being named CMA Comedian of the Year in 1969, he remained largely in the background. Later, Campbell found balance through fun and painting, 2 personal passions that allowed him to temporarily escape the business world. He even opened an art gallery, helped run a school in Knoxville, and pioneered the first skateboarding course in the United States. But his health began to fail. On August 29, 1987, Archie Campbell died of a heart attack at the age of 72. The people of Tennessee were horrified. Dr. Campbell never showed any signs of decline. At the time of his death, Archie Campbell's net worth was estimated at $2 million, earned from comedy albums, television appearances, writing, and personal art projects. The stars of Hee Haw left an unforgettable legacy, but their tragedies remind us that behind every laugh there are tearful stories. Junior Samples was himself. Born Alvin Samples, Jr., on August 10, 1926, he became a stand-up comedy sensation on Hee Haw, starting in 1969 when he was 43 years old. Playing himself as a bus salesman, then a car salesman, he brought laughter to millions of people for 14 years. But behind that laughter was an extremely difficult life. Junior, who only completed the 6th grade, grew up in poverty, working as a carpenter and racing cars to make ends meet. His big break came from an exaggerated story about falling into a giant fish, which made him a radio sensation. However, his immediate fame left him struggling to manage both his public image and his family life. He struggled with severe alcoholism, which led to frequent arguments, heartache, and loneliness. Although he had 5 children with his wife, Grace Bolton, their family relationship was often strained. He missed important moments in his children's lives, a fact that haunted him deeply, even as he maintained a cheerful demeanor on television. Despite his on-screen popularity, Junior was very conscious of his background and his weight, which reached nearly 400 pounds. That weight, combined with unhealthy habits, contributed to the heart attack that killed him on November 13, 1983. At the age of 57, his death shocked the Southern entertainment world, and his funeral, presided over by a close friend, Reverend Douglas Collins, drew hundreds of mourners. At the time of his death, Junior Samples' net worth was only about $1 million, a modest figure given his vast influence. Ronnie Stoneman as herself, Veronica Loretta Stoneman, better known by her stage name Ronnie Stoneman, was born on May 5, 1938 and was known as the First Lady of Banjo. At the age of 31, she joined the Hee Haw cast, helping to define the comedic tone of the show as Ida Lee Nagger, a wife who mistreats her husband in a writing style that blends comedy and heartbreak. With her banjo and Southern charm, Ronnie became the voice of rural America's working class. She was the 15th of 23 children of legendary pop musician Stoneman. Her childhood was one of chaos, poverty, and strict discipline. In a family where music was the key to survival, Ronnie was forced into training right away. Deprived of a real childhood, his father's strict expectations made him feel like he was constantly fighting for his right to exist. Every laugh he brought to the audience came at the cost of the memories he was trying to preserve. Sleepless nights, days of aching fingers from intense rehearsals. After her father died in 1968, Ronnie tried to strike out on her own, but her career was a struggle. Despite her fame with Hee Haw, she lived in the shadow of her more famous male co-stars. Her early gigs, low pay, and the industry's quiet discrimination led to major bouts of depression. "I was paid in laughter, but life required my whole being," she once said. Later in life, Ronnie would accompany her sister Donna, the last surviving Stoneman sibling, to local parties. His health was failing, but he still smiled at everyone. Few knew that behind the stage makeup were scary faces behind windows and cold nights sleeping in cars because he couldn't afford a room. When he died on February 22, 2024, at the age of 80, his net worth was estimated at $1 million, a modest figure for someone who devoted more than 6 decades of his life to music and performance. Sarah Ophelia Colley Cannon, born October 25, 1912, captured the hearts of audiences as Minnie Pearl, the pretty country girl with a $1.98 price tag that was constantly drying on her face in a greeting of "Hello, I'm so proud to be here." At 57, she became the life and soul of Hee Haw from 1969 to 1991. But behind the charm and humor were years of turmoil, illness, disappointment, and loneliness. When she entered the world of piercing, she had to do everything herself, traveling the South as a piercer, a director and a survivor on the smallest stages. Her first public appearance came in the 1960s, when she lent her name to the Minnie Pearl chain of stores. Although she had no involvement in managing the chain, a financial and business scandal destroyed her reputation. Caught in investigations and convicted, she spent years feeling humiliated and betrayed. Her marriage to Henry Cannon, a former pilot who later became her manager and business partner, seemed stable, but quiet cracks began to appear over time. After decades together, what remained between them was distance and loneliness. With no children, she gave it all, but that devotion came at a cost. Her greatest pain came in the early 1990s when Minnie was diagnosed with breast cancer. Chemotherapy, radiation, and a mastectomy devastated her both physically and mentally. However, with extraordinary determination, she became a brave angel in the fight against cancer. She was an advocate for a cancer center that later bore her name and expanded across the United States and the United Kingdom. During this time, she lived off an estimated net worth of $5 million. In June 1991, a bout of depression ended her piercing career. She spent her final years in a nursing home in Nashville, visited by friends and younger artists, but eventually it all passed. On March 4, 1996, she died at the age of 83 after another incident. One of the most defining figures in country music was Loretta Lynn. Born on April 14, 1932, Loretta Lynn began appearing on Hee Haw in the early 1970s and, well into her 40s, established herself as a daring country singer, delivering honest songs based on real life. Behind the glamour was a life of tears. Born into poverty in Kentucky's Cabbage Patch, Loretta married at 15 and became a mother at 16. Her 50-year marriage to Oliver Doolittle Lynn was a tumultuous mix of love, infidelity, violence, and alcoholism. Doolittle was often trusting and sometimes abusive, but he also bought her first guitar and kept it as a showpiece. Fame came early, but it did nothing to ease her pain. She lost 2 children, one in an accident, the other to drug addiction. That sadness followed Loretta throughout her life, and her music became more honest and sad because of it. Songs like A Cabbage Miner's Daughter, You Ain't Woman Enough, and Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' are more than just songs. They are cries for help and stepping stones for women who have been silenced. In 2017, Loretta suffered a serious injury, then a broken leg, in a fall. Although she was no longer able to perform on stage, she continued to release music and publish books. On October 4, 2022, Loretta Lynn passed away peacefully in her sleep at her home in Hurricane Mills, Tennessee, at the age of 90. Her current net worth is estimated at $65 million. Merle Haggard, born April 6, 1937, made several memorable appearances on Hee Haw in the 1970s when he was 30 years old. He wasn't playing a fictional character, he was playing himself, and that was enough. With his shocked face, his rebellious physique, and his voice that screamed and screamed, Merle exuded a kind of authenticity that couldn't be replicated in country music. His powerful words come from experience, from a man who has spent much of his life on the frontier, far from the boundaries of comfort or convention. But behind the lawyer's fame and mystique lies a childhood scarred by trauma and hardship. When Merle was just 9 years old, his father died suddenly. That loss shaped much of his life. His mother, distraught and weeping, became extremely strict. Merle, barefoot and angry, began running away from home as a teenager. He kept getting into trouble, getting arrested for crimes, getting into fights, and even escaping from juvenile detention. Eventually, he was sent to San Quentin State Prison, one of the most notorious institutions in the country. It was there, behind bars, that he witnessed Johnny Cash dancing in front of the lawyers, an experience that lit a fire under him. That day, Merle promised himself that when he got out of prison, he would change, and he did. Music saved him. It was his confession, his therapy, and his salvation, all intertwined with songs like Mama Tried, Sing Me Back Home, and Branded Man. Merle tells stories not just of pain and rebellion, but of reflection and wisdom. He didn't just sing about pain, he made it beautiful, and in doing so, he gave it meaning. But no matter how high he climbed, his demons always followed him. Merle Haggard was married 5 times, and most of those relationships were marked by jealousy, infidelity, despair, and emotional distance. He openly admitted to years of cocaine use, suffered from long bouts of depression, and seriously considered ending his life. The applause never erased the echoes of the past. Even after winning 3 Grammys, and even after receiving a full pardon from President Ronald Reagan, Merle was still a man who carried the emotional burden of all he had been through. Toward the end of his life, Haggard was diagnosed with leukemia, a battle that lasted for years. But even as the disease began to ravage his body, he did not stop. He continued to tour, perform, and connect with audiences. On some shows, she sang with an oxygen tank hidden under her dress. Out of sight, the show had to go on, and she gave it her all until the very end. On April 6, 2016, her 79th birthday, Merle Haggard died peacefully at her home in California from complications of pneumonia. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $40 million. A respectable figure, yes, but one that rarely reflects the value of his legacy. String Bean was him. Buck Owens, as well as himself, Elvis Edgar. Buck Owens Jr. was born on August 12, 1929, and became a major figure in American music when he started studying at Hee Haw in 1969, at the age of 40. With 21 milestones and a distinctive Bakersfield sound, Buck and his best friend Don Rich reshaped American music. But behind the aura of fame was a life of suffering, romance, and a wound that never healed. Buck lived with passion, but died slowly and alone. When Don Rich died suddenly in 1974, not only did he lose a musical companion, but, as Buck put it, the music of the era died in him. Creativity was destroyed, records lost their appeal, and although Hee Haw continued, Buck seemed like a ghost. He became unreliable, temperamental, and dropped out of several colleges. Former employees recall him constantly intimidating and creating an atmosphere of fear. His personal life was also troubled. 4 marriages, 3 ending in divorce, 1 annulled, marked a series of emotional failures that Buck never fully understood. His first wife, Bonnie, left him just as he was starting his career. His subsequent marriages were short and stormy. At one point, he married violinist Jana Jay, but filed for divorce just days later. After Hee Haw, Owens focused on business, buying up several radio stations and building the Buck Owens Enterprises empire. Despite making hundreds of millions of dollars from media sales, he never regained the one thing he had lost. Even his 1988 reunion duet with Dwight Yoakam, Streets of Bakersfield, felt like a flop. On March 25, 2006, after rehearsing at Crystal Palace, Buck Owens died of a heart attack in his sleep at the age of 76. He left behind a massive musical legacy and an estimated fortune of $100 million. Roy Clark as Roy Linwood Clark was born on April 15, 1933, and became part of the American soul as the owner of Hee Haw, starting in 1969 when he was 36 years old. For nearly 3 decades, Roy's genuine smile, banjo in hand, and down-to-earth sense of humor have been etched into the memories of millions. But behind that smile was a life full of wounds. Born into a poor family, Roy's childhood was marred by the hardships of the Great Depression. He often got wet playing country music, which made him shy and isolated, turning to music as his only refuge. As he became more famous, he used laughter to hide his pain, to the point where he could no longer distinguish the driller from the man behind the window. In 1957, Roy was murdered by his mentor Jimmy Dean for his habit of being late. The shock was like a bucket of cold water poured on his artistic dreams. Although it should have been a great lesson, his erratic temperament and rebellious attitude continued to alienate his peers in the years that followed. He quietly began drinking, which he said was to drown out the noise of his loneliness. By the late 1980s, his alcoholism had taken hold of him, damaging his relationships and forcing him to retreat to the applause of the stage. Roy's love life was equally troubled. His first marriage to Ruby Conley ended after only 3 years. Although his second marriage to Barbara Rappard lasted until his death, their relationship suffered from emotional distance. Fueled by fame and Roy's reaction to his feelings, his attempts to appear cheerful in public left him exhausted at home. He had 5 children, but their father was rarely present in their lives. On November 15, 2018, Roy Clark died at his home in Tulsa from complications of pneumonia at the age of 85. His true worth, $10 million, accumulated through decades of performances, television appearances, and endorsement deals, was never realized due to the loneliness he carried with him until the end of his life. Tammy Wynette, as herself. Tammy Wynette, born May 5, 1942, was honored with a guest role in the play Hee Haw when she was 27 years old, playing herself, a national singer who conquered audiences with her emotional and profound melodies. Her life story is one of tragedy, poetry, and unexpected challenges. Born a poor girl picking cotton in Mississippi, Tammy pursued her musical dreams, teaching herself piano by ear and singing hymns to support her children. Her life was tumultuous, first with Yuppie Bird, which ended in depression and electroshock therapy, then with Don Chapel, a mess of accusations and nude photo scandals. Third, her relationship with George Jones, which was rife with controversy, addiction, and even a gunshot wound, ended in divorce in 1975. Tammy then married Michael Tomlin, but moved out of their home 6 weeks later, and then remarried George Ritchie, who was accused of emotional abuse and financial control, leaving Tammy dependent on medication in her later years. Her struggles were not limited to her personal life. Despite being dubbed the First Lady of Country Music, with 20 #1 hits, including the controversial Stand By Your Man, fame took a significant turn. Overwhelmed by the pressure, she suffered from chronic abdominal pain after a hysterectomy and multiple surgeries, becoming dependent on Demerol, Valium, and Dilaudid. On April 6, 1998, Tammy Wynette died at age 55 in Nashville of lung cancer after years of battling the disease and chronic pain addiction. She was murdered at Woodlawn Memorial Park, where her gravestone was controversially renamed Virginia W. Richardson, her married name, until a petition by family and fans restored her name to Tammy Wynette. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $10 million, a modest figure for a woman of great influence.